August 1st. We're looking at a 4-hour Bitcoin chart, and we're not just going to forecast the price movement for the upcoming week. We're also going to look at the price movement for the long term, the best moves for intraday trading or scalping. And on top of that, I'm going to explain why the majority, I'd say 99% of strategies fail when it comes to risk management. At the end of the video, we'll also take a look at how the July challenge turned out. And without further ado, let's dive into the content because we have a lot to talk about. So let's get started. I'm Michael Vasquez. This is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. And after 15 years in professional trading, what I've seen that works is looking for what the big players, the institutions are doing, since they're the ones trying to trick retail traders. The key to understanding price movement is simply to change your mindset. Stop being retail, the small individual investors, and start thinking like the big players. In other words, look for those strategies that become obvious once you change your mindset. But at first, you look for indicators, you chase FOMO, you try different strategies that small investors use and lose just like small investors do. Even though our portfolios may be small, we want to have a big player mentality. All right, let's analyze this. So, like I was saying before, let's look at why risk management fails 99% of the time. What I see in most strategies is that they always say you have to set an SL, a stop loss, and a TP, a take profit, already defined when the move you want to enter begins. And the take profit has to be double or triple the stop loss. And the reason that's usually given is that if you win once, you've already made up for 2 times that you lose. Actually, it might sound good if you don't analyze it, but once you get into the swing of things and start losing, you realize that it doesn't really work. And the reason is this, and it's obvious. You're starting out, imagine 3 trades or 6 trades, but right from the start, you're already counting 2 as losses and relying on just 1 win to make up for the other 2. So it's practically impossible because out of every 3 trades, you're already losing 2 right from the start and hoping that the 3rd one gives you a chance to make a little profit. And I'm telling you, that strategy in general is very, very unlikely to work because you're leaving a lot of trades on the table that you later realize were actually good. They hit your stop loss, and then in the end, they went in the direction you wanted or predicted with good judgment. What you have to do, from my point of view and from what I've seen actually works, is simply to enter well. Enter well, and once you're in the trade, decide at that moment if you want to stop, if you've lost more than you expected, or, on the other hand, if the conditions are still right. Instead of waiting an hour like you thought, maybe you have to wait a day, a week, or 4 hours. That's the most important thing from my point of view to win at trading, making a good entry and knowing what the big players are doing. All right, so how are we going to know what the big players are going to do? By using, price action and especially volume, because that's where the big players always leave their clues, or at least the most obvious clues, not in other indicators. If what you're interested in is making money with trading, whether professionally or as a side job, I've designed a course where you'll stop looking at indicators and start understanding what the market is really doing, what the big players are actually doing, and you'll be able to make money the way they do. Let's continue with the analysis. Support and resistance. We have 60,000 and 68,000 marking a very, very clear channel since that breakout we saw on the 2nd of when June started. June 2nd, we saw this breakout in the beginning of the channel. We've already spent 2 months in this channel between 60 and 68 waiting in the long term. I'll show you so you can see it. In the long term, we're in this accumulation phase. We're waiting for that breakout to the upside. But now the next approach or support/resistance is the lower one, which is 60,000. With that in mind, let's go to our 4-hour chart and see how that movement is developing. We add the fundamental element to spot the strong hands, which is volume, simple volume. On the 4-hour chart, we look for volume spikes above the 4-hour average. Sorry. On the 4-hour chart, volume spikes above 1.5, and we've seen quite a few this week. Now the weekend is here, and I always tell you that on weekends, Bitcoin's movement, since there's less volume, develops differently. And many times, the weekend, Friday afternoon, ends exactly the same as Sunday night. That is, the weekend can have some fluctuations, but in the end, it usually ends up at the same point. Last weekend broke that pattern and ended a bit higher, and this weekend, it's very likely we'll see the same pattern as last weekend. In other words, it's a slow movement looking for the retest I mentioned below, $64,000, and then aiming for this area where we are now, which is the zone where Bitcoin's price will likely feel comfortable throughout the coming week. That is, it's aiming for the 60,000 zone, and it will start to fluctuate. We'll see movements approaching 64,000, probably not quite reaching it, but getting close, with increasingly lower lows until we finally enter that phase of touching 60,000. It will start to fluctuate in that zone, breaking below and above it, and very likely begin that move towards 68. Of course, we need to analyze the volume once the price gets close to 60,000, because there's always the possibility of breaking through that 60,000, and instead of it being an accumulation, it could turn into a second distribution and head downward. At first, it's a much less likely possibility, but we always have to analyze all the clues that appear on the chart. That's why I post updates every day. Even with the previous clues, the new ones that show up help refine that forecast. They always give us something. All right, we've already set that forecast for next week. We've also looked at how things are going to play out over the weekend. Let's take a look at what are these elements of intraday or scalping in my VIP Telegram channel, which has fewer than 10 spots left. When we reach 100, I'll close it, and the only way to get in would be by signing up at mex.com and making a deposit. That would open up a spot in that VIP Telegram. Basically, it's open to anyone who wants to join, and what I do is share 2 entries, the 2 trades I make daily, and we've had more than 40, I don't know if it's between 40 or 50 consecutive profitable trades. All right, I'll leave the link in the description for you. I'll also leave the link to my course so you can understand this simple methodology from scratch and learn to apply it just like I do on any chart. All right, what we're saying about scalping or intraday trading is that, as you can see, since yesterday afternoon, Friday afternoon, the movement has stopped. This is very, very, very typical for the weekend. There's little movement until suddenly it shows up. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes a big player steps in and takes a position over the weekend. Like I said, last weekend it didn't happen, but the one before that it did, and we saw a big spike. It's important to position yourself correctly, but in any case, even if you've taken the opposite side, even if you've taken a contrary position, usually the market is efficient and will send the price back to where it was. What we're gonna look for during this scalping or intraday trading this weekend is for the price to move a bit more. It can't stay this still all weekend long. We'll start to see that movement approaching 64 and then dropping down. And like every day, what we're looking for in scalping are the 3 elements to enter: significant volume, rejection wicks, and reaching an important zone. The important zone, as you know, on the 15 or 30-minute chart doesn't have to be the same as on the 4-hour or weekly chart. All the important zones on the 4-hour or weekly chart are important on the 15 or 30-minute chart, but not all the 15 or 30-minute zones are important on the 4-hour or weekly chart. Okay, so what we would do is look for these zones. For example, this one was very important yesterday when we saw the bounce near 62,500. There, we really saw all the elements I mentioned to you. Price reaching 62,500, rejection wicks, and significant volume. All 3 elements, and we saw exactly that upward movement. So, what we need to look for is exactly those elements in another spot. When the price starts moving, for example, in my course, I tell you how to detect all these elements, but we have a major resistance at 63,600 and another one at 64. When it gets close to these levels, if we see a rejection wick along with significant volume, it doesn't have to be a candle with such a large volume. It would be enough if it was, I'd say, between half and 2/3 of this candle. That would be enough to signal a significant short for the weekend. Now let's move on to the challenge. The challenge was completed. I'll show you yesterday's entry, which was the last one in July, and the account ended with $1,092. That is, I started on July 1st with 500, making micro trades, small trades of $15, $20, $30 at the end, until, as you can see, without making things too complicated, just entering well and waiting for the TP for MXC to send the TP to my account, I've more than doubled the initial capital. Very well. The 592 that I won, I raffled among all of you who signed up at mex.com and made a deposit. Here I'm showing you the email of the person who won. You have 3 days to get in touch with me because from MX, I can't see your full email address. So with this information, I'm sure you know who you are. Get in touch. If you haven't done it within 3 days, I'll proceed with a new drawing. Today, we're starting the August challenge with the same system. I'm starting with $500. The account is already at 500. Here I'm starting with 500. I'll be making micro entries, maybe the first ones with 15. Then, if the account grows, I'll move up to 20, then 30, and whatever I earn at the end of the month, I'll also raffle off among those of you who sign up new this August on mexi.com and make your first deposit. I'm Michael Vasquez, and this is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. I really appreciate you watching this video, and as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video. There'll be more clues that are sure to pop up this weekend, and we need to pay attention to each and every one of them. See, so